Again, I apologize for the technical difficulties and for how quickly I went through these things. So thank you to everyone who said that we need to go over this again, and that it was not working over Zoom. So we will not try that again so quickly. I think trying to run different applications and having you do something while also trying to watch my screen on Zoom is not going to work very well. And I didn't think that through very well. So again, I'm sorry for that, and I will not make you do that again. So in the future, for all of the things where I'm trying to have you do a new skill, I will post these as like YouTube videos for you to watch so that you can follow along at your own pace. You can go back, you can minimize it, you can watch it on your phone, whatever you need to do. And then we'll just troubleshoot when we're back in class. Okay, so let's jump into this heart rate lab data that we have. So when you got this, I'm just going to get rid of the data to show what this should have looked like when you opened this. So I gave you a copy of this sheet that should have on the first page for my data. This is just the labels for whether you were resting, exercising, or in recovery. So resting post-exercise. And then I just color-coded it to make the table look a little bit cleaner. The trial numbers that are from your data that you recorded yourself. And then beats per 15 seconds. So I said this during class, but if you did it, your actual BPM, if you either used a watch or calculated it out for 60 seconds for a full beats per minute, that's fine. It's not going to affect the curve of your graph, the shape of your graph, and really the shape of it is all we really care about for this one. So I'm going to put the data back in that I took from someone. Sorry, wrong. So let's try someone different today. Let's try this. Student D. And then I'm going to go back to my data. And I'm actually going to post it in here. And so we have all of their data in. You can type this in. I just copy and pasted it in, which I guess you couldn't see from what I did. Okay, so we entered our data. We're going to insert a line graph for the heart rate over. We are going to do what we did the first time. You are going to highlight column B and C because what we care about is the trials and your heart rate. So we are going to do insert and go down to chart. And here we get this nice little chart about your heart rate during our exercise time. So from trials 1 through 5, we have this part down here, which is pretty, like, not flat, but it's pretty consistent. And then it pops right up for trial 6 through 15, which were the exercise ones. It's pretty high here. And then it goes back down low for the resting at the end, which is great. You can change it. You can make it look squiggly. You can, if you would prefer it to be a scatter plot, you could do that. Again, if it put in the wrong chart for you, let's say maybe it made a bar graph, we don't want that. So we'll go back, click on chart type in this editor, and go here. So we want to keep it like this. Let's see if we do all three. Just in case, if you had edited, put all in, yeah, this is a mess. So we're not going to worry about trying to get this label in there. And then the last thing that I did, again, if you're on a computer, this will work for you. The last thing that I did to change this graph is I wanted to change the title to something that sounds a little bit better. So beats in 15 seconds versus trial doesn't make a lot of sense for our heart rate lab. So what I'm going to do here, you can change it down here, or you can just double click at the top. I'm going to say change in or comparing heart rate to, sorry, I'm going to change it one more time. Effect of heart rate on exercise. Okay, so I'm sorry, I know I do that a lot, that I think of a better thing to say or write while I'm writing it. So effective heart rate on exercise, and then I'm done. This is what I want my chart to look like. So this one I don't think was so bad for people. I know there were problems you couldn't see the chart, and that I don't know why that happened. But I think based on your graphing practice you did before, everyone seemed pretty good at making these line graphs. So the one where we're going to do something new is going to be this class data set. So the reason we're going to do a class data set is because it's always better to take an average than it is to get just one person's experience, because you don't know if maybe you don't know if they were stressed out or if their heart rate is usually low or high. The more people you can get into a trial, generally the better your results will be. So we are going to use 8 random students from our class, and we need to take an average. So to take an average, let me pull up sorry, wrong one. If we were going to take your average like on paper of your data, we would have to do average equals add all trials. Okay, let me do that better. Trial 1 plus trial 2 plus trial 3, all the way until plus trial 20, oh I guess trial 5. And then you would divide by the number of trials, which would be 5. So that would be a lot to do here. Adding up all 8 numbers and then dividing by 8 would be fine if we did it once, but if we have to do it 20 times, that's going to be a lot. So what we're going to do instead is use the average, have Sheets calculate the average for you. So use the average equation that we can use here. So to put an equation, to make Sheets or Excel or any other spreadsheet like this do the math for you, what we're going to do is to do an equal sign. So as soon as you say equals, if you can see this little bracket pop up here, this means instead of just leaving whatever I type there, I want you to do something with this information. So for here, we're going to put in an average. So I'm just going to write average. And then it'll tell you if there is an equation that does that. So we see the numerical average of a value in the data set. So ignore the text and just take average of any numbers you find. So that's what we want. And so to take that average, what we have to do is, instead of putting things, like to tell you that these are the numbers, instead of saying use these numbers, the way that Sheets does it is you have to put things in parentheses. So to take an average, you'll say take an average of whatever's within these parentheses. So what you do is you just select, you grab all of the data that you want, You close the parentheses again to say, okay, that's it. Those are the only things I want the average of. And you can see it's previewing the answer right here. I'm going to press enter. And then what we always want to do when we take an average is to make sure that it kind of makes sense. So the average should be in the middle of our numbers. And I'm just going to look that our numbers go from 13 to 39. And there's a couple 20s in there, 18s, 19, 16. 20 looks like it's going to be about right. If you took an average and then it said something like 5 as our answer, we would know I did something wrong. But this looks like it makes sense. So I'm going to do that one more time. So write just average. You can also just click on this here. Let me go back. As soon as you say equals average, it'll be on this list and you can click on it to select. I'm going to do the same thing for my second row because I want the averages of each row. So I want the average for trial 2, average for 3, average for 4. I'm going to close my parentheses again, press enter, and this time I get a little over 18, almost 19. And again, that looks like it makes sense. Okay, so I could do this for each one. I could write average, select my data, and press enter, which is fine if you want to do that. There's not a problem at all with doing that. There is a shortcut that you can use. So again, this is all on a computer. I am going to post a second video that is about doing this on an iPad or a phone. I don't suggest using a phone for this just because the screen is so small, but this is just how to do it on a computer. So you'll see that as you're going through, your cursor changes between 3 different icons. The normal one, just to select things, is just my arrow. And then if you go onto the border of one of your cells of one of your boxes here, it turns into a little hand that if you click down grabs. So this is like you're picking it up and moving it. So if I were to do this, that would move the 21 away. I'm not going to undo that. So we don't want that. This is another hard thing about sheets is that you have to be careful about what your cursor looks like when you click. So what I want it to do is if you see this little box here in the corner, what this says is take whatever is in this box and we're going to copy it. We're going to like pull it down and copy whatever I said, whatever equation I wrote, we're going to copy down here. So the nice thing about it is if we look at what I typed in here or I selected, this said take the average of this row of row 3. What happens when I drag it down, I'll just do the next one. So I'm going to click, once my cursor turns into this little cross, when I move over that square, I'm going to click down and drag it down. That if we look at what it actually wrote into that cell, what it actually copied for us, it didn't copy the exact same thing. It didn't copy C3J3 here. It copied C4J4. So it said, whatever I did to this row, I want you to do to this row as well. So this is very nice that if you're doing something like add up all the numbers, and you're doing it a lot of times, it can figure out what you're trying to do, and it will continue the pattern that you've made all the way down. So let me do it just for all of our blues, all of our resting, to show, again, these are all different numbers, so we know that it's not just copy-pasting the entire cell. I'll drag down for all the exercise. You can do it all at once. I'm just breaking it down so we can see that these are all changing. And then one last time, I'll drag it down here. So we have now our class averages for each of our trials. Okay, so now we are going to make our chart of this data. So we don't want to have everyone's in there necessarily, but let's do that first. So just to show what a simple version of this could be, it's going to look very cluttered, but we're going to graph everyone's data and the class average all on the same graph. So this would take us a long time to do by hand. But what we're going to do is we're going to highlight all of our data. You could also just click here and that'll highlight the entire page. And we are going to insert a chart. And it's probably going to look like a mess at first. Yes, it is definitely a mess. And what we want it to be is a line chart. Okay, so here we can see this gets very messy. If we have all of our trials in there at once, we can see that most of them follow that same path, but we only really want to see the class average. So this is kind of a mess. So you can do this part and then delete it, because this is just showing why we don't generally graph everyone's data, why we like the average instead. This is hard to read and hard to understand what's happening when our average is right in here. So we're going to delete that guy. And then what I'm going to do, there's two different ways that we could do this. So the first way, if you are confident about using keyboard shortcuts and things like that, what you can do is we are going to highlight column B because we only want trial versus class average. We don't want this stuff in the middle. What I'm going to do is I highlight this one. Instead of dragging it all the way over, what you can do is if you're on a Chromebook, you're going to hit Control. If you're on a Mac, you're going to use Command instead. But whatever key that you have just to the left and right of the spacebar, if you put that down, what it does is it says, I want that, leave that highlighted, and also then you can highlight a second thing. So this is how you select things without selecting the things in the middle. This is a trick that works in basically every application. If you're selecting things, if you want to select multiple files to attach, if you hold Command and just click around, it'll add them all. And we're going to go to Chart. And so here we get a class average over trials. Perfect. I'm going to drag this down for a second because I want to show you a couple other ways that we could get this data. If you don't like using that shortcut, a couple ways that we could get that data in. Let me pull this back up. Okay, the second way that we could get that, if you are not comfortable with using that selecting thing, which is fine, especially it's very hard to teach this while we're not together in class. But what you can do is, because we don't need these numbers anymore, we can't delete them, but we can do something called hiding them. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to click and highlight all of these columns that I don't need anymore. And then if we go to this little drop down arrow that shows up in the upper right corner, we can go down to this option here that says hide columns C through J. So what this will do is it will hide them from your site, but they will still be there. The information is still there, so we could get it later. So we'll say hide. And you can see here that there are these arrows now that tell us that something is there, that rows or columns C through J are in here. And if you were to click on this, they would pop back up. So I'm going to re-hide them. And now we can do the same thing that you did on that first page. So I can highlight my data. I can insert a chart. And it gives us, just to show, it's the same chart that we got before. Okay. Goodness, and now I can't get it to move. Okay, the third way, so I'm going to pull this down as well. If neither of those sound like good options to you, what you can do is we can literally, and I think I did this before when we did a trial because my computer was glitching on me. I can copy, and I'll do it up here so you can see what I'm doing. I'm just going to copy and paste this information into basically a new table. Okay. Wait, actually, let me redo what just happened. So if I say copy and paste here, it did the wrong numbers because what it ended up doing is shifting everything over. So I'm going to delete that. And what I need to do is to go to Edit, Copy. So we're still going to copy this data. And then here where I want to put it, instead of saying paste, there's this option called Paste Special. So what I'm going to do is I just want the values. I don't want the equations that I wrote in there. I just want these numbers to pop up. So if I go to Paste Values, it's going to copy the values over. So now I can just highlight those two next to each other and insert a chart. And again, the same chart pops up. And then we can see that our class average, I'm going to copy and paste this just over here so we can look at our class average versus individual. We can see that it follows the basic same shape. So it's just a little bit different. But we can see it's the same general pattern that happens, is that resting is low, it pops right up when it goes to exercise, and then it comes back down. And then it just kind of smooths out based on the average numbers that we got. Not every change that happened here pops up here. So this was really good. It looks like you all did a good job with collecting your data. What we will talk about on Monday when we're writing your conclusion is why everybody's individual graph is going to look a little bouncy like this and not look like a perfect looking heart rate curve. This is normal. This is a normal average. So great job, everybody. If this still doesn't make sense, I just want you to comment on the Google Sheet assignment. So comment on the day 2 data, or comment on the link to this video in Google Classroom and say this still does not make sense to me. And you can just use my average data in making your assumption. I still want you to graph your own for your first page here. If you can do this graph, that's great. That's all you need to do. And then I will just give you the class averages. If you want to practice doing this making averages thing, that's fine. But this was a lot for me to throw at you on week 3. And this is somewhere that we'll get. You'll be super comfortable doing this by like January. Okay? So great job on data collection, everybody, because these all look beautiful, all these graphs that I've used your data for. And then all I need you to do is to do these graphs by yourselves, and then when we come back together, we will do that last part, the conclusion, on Monday. So that's it. Great work. Let me know if you have any questions on how to do this.